Good evening. We're learning Maseches Kesubos Daf Ayin Vav. We are starting about 7 lines down at Rav Ashi Omar. If you will recall, yesterday on Daf Ayin Hey, at the very bottom of Daf Ayin Hey Amud Aleph, at the top of Ayin Hey Amud Beis, we learned the Mishnah that had opposite implications about whether or not the Baal was Mehemen or whether or not the father was Mehemen, and that's what we've already seen two answers. And here the Gemara provides a third answer, Ayin Vav Amud Aleph, 8 lines down. Rav Ashi Omar, Mana le'aba biyadcha. In one case, it is that the father is owed a mana, meaning that he wants the ksuba money, and therefore, hamotzi mechavero alav haraya, he has to bring a raya. That's why the Mishnah says he has to bring proof. However, v'seifa, in the second case, where she is, what is the second case in our Mishnah? If you look at the very bottom of Ayin Hey Amud Aleph in the Mishnah, it says Nichnasa l'reshus habal, that if she has already moved into the husband's house, then the husband has to bring a raya. So v'seifa mana li biyadcha, she says that you owe me money, because the father doesn't get the money after she gets married. She gets the money after she gets married if there's a divorce. So therefore, that's how the Gemara answers up the opposite implications, is that they're different cases. Esve, however, the Gemara is bothered by this. Esve Ravacha berei de Rav Avia le Rav Ashi. Mo de Rav Meir. Rav Meir agreed in a different case. B'mumin harui and lavo imami beisaviha she'al ha'av lahavi raya. That in a somewhat similar case, if there's a mum that came from the house of her childhood, that the father has to check. That's against what we just learned, because our Mishnah on the bottom of Ayin Hey says that if a woman moves into her husband's house and there's a mum, the husband has to bring a raya if he wants to not pay the ksuba. Here it says the father needs to. So asks the Gemara, it's a case where she would be the recipient of the ksuba, and if that's true, she should, if that's the case, then it should be like it was in our Mishnah, where the Baal has the responsibility to bring the proof and not the father. The Gemara says, when she has an extra finger, she has 6 fingers. My wife had a classmate who had 6 toes. She was a skater, so it made the skates fit a little bit funky. But she had 6 toes. It's just how she was born.
Better balance.
What?
Better balance.
In theory, that's true. Better balance. In theory. So then the Gemara asks, what?
That's not move.
Oh, it is by definition a move. That is, of course, a move. Yeah. Are you good? I don't even know. I've lost where the innuendo starts and ends. I can't even tell. So, I know. So the Gemara says, wait a second. You say if in fact she has a 6th finger, if she has an extra finger, my raya maisi, what proof is there to bring? She's always had a 6th finger. So says the Gemara, no. The proof that can be brought is raya de rav and a fayisu, just to say, no. He knew about it and he didn't care. And then it's not a mum. If he marries her on with the understanding that she has 6 digits, then that's fine. There's no reason why they can't stay married. He accepted that. It's only if he married her under the assumption that she had 10 fingers and it turned out she had 11, that's a mekach, but that's not this case. So the raya that would need to be brought in this case is as to whether or not he knew beforehand and he was therefore accepting of this mum, of having an extra digit. At the 2 dots, 6 lines from the bottom of the page, the Gemara quotes a brisa, and this brisa is going to be used to compare to our Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Hamachlif para bechamor. Let's say that I own a cow and you own a donkey, and we're switching. We make an even trade. There's no money changing hands. I'm giving you a para, you're giving me a donkey. You need milk, I need a traveling animal. So it's a perfect match, even deal. Then umashach bal hachamor es hapara. You who own the chamor, you do meshicha, the kinyan, to acquire the para, and the para becomes yours. And then on the spot, v'lo hispik bal hapara limshoch es hachamor ad shemeis hachamor. So everything is happening in rapid succession. We agree to the deal. I have a para, you have a chamor. You reach over and you take the reins of the para and you pull it your way. That's meshicha, your kona. Instantly the chamor dies. So what happens? We have transactions like this all the time. Okay, here's what I'm giving you. And then when you give me what you're giving me, it drops and shatters into 1,000 pieces. What does the Gemara say in such a case? Al bal hachamor lahavi raya shahachamoro kayam b'shas meshichas para. It is the responsibility of the owner of the chamor to bring a proof that the animal was alive during the meshichas para. And what that means is as follows. If the meshichas para, in fact, took place while the chamor was still alive, and then the chamor died, done deal. The person loses out on the chamor because the transaction already took place. I've already done my part. The cow is mine. You haven't even done the meshicha yet. Nevertheless, the chamor is still yours. I guess you can sell the carcass, but you won't have a living animal anymore. And the Gemara compares this case to our case, Vitana Tuna Kala. This is also similarly what was taught in regards to the Kala. But we don't know which case in our Mishnah this compares to. Does it compare to the first case of the Mishnah on the bottom of Ayin Hamad Aleph? The case whereas our Mishnah writes on the bottom of Ayin Hey Amid Aleph, where Hayuba Mumin Va'oda B'Vei she has a mum, she's still in her father's house. Or no, is it talking about a case where she's married and the husband of her Baal, and then they find the mum? So on the very bottom line of Ayin Vav Amid Aleph, the Gemara asks, Hey Kala, which Kala are we talking about that is comparable to our new brisa over here of the para and the chamor? Ilema, turning to the top of Daf Ayin Vav Amid Beis. If you want to say top line of Ayin Vav Amud Beis, Kala B'Vei Saviha, that it's similar to the case of the bride who's still living in her father's house, meaning there's Erusin but not yet Nisuin, that in that case we see that there's a mum. Says the Gemara, Midami, the case of the para and the chamor is not comparable to the case of the woman who has a mum after Erusin. Why not? Because Hasam Maisi Av Raya Umapik, over there, when the father can prove that the husband knew about this, so then it's not a mekach tos, and then all is well and good. But hacha, over here by the animals, maisi bala chamor raya umokim. So there are different things that are being accomplished. If the husband gets his way, then he gets a ksuba, he collects money. But in the case of the par and the chamor, if the bala chamor gets his way, then he doesn't have to spend money. So the results of what they're trying to prove are very different. Again, in the case of the kala, if the father proves that he is correct, then he collects a ksuba and he collects money. So his raya will collect money. But the bala chamor and the brisa on the bottom of Ayin Vav Amud Aleph, if he succeeds, he has to not spend money. So therefore, the cases are not comparable. Therefore, Amar Rabbi Abba on the third line, Kala Beveis Chamiha. We're talking about, when we compare the case of para and chamor, we're talking about that case as it relates to our Mishnah, only where the bride found her mumin once she was already married. Says the Gemara, Ve'akati lo dami, but still the cases are not similar. Hasam, over there, in regards to the woman who found a mum when she was married, Baal Maisi Raya, if the husband can bring a raya that she did not have this mum beforehand, he ruins her chazaka. But hacha, in regards to the case of the para and the chamor, Bala Chamor Maisi Raya, Umokim Chazaka Biyade. The Bala Chamor is just trying to keep things status quo. He already has the para, and he doesn't want to have to pay for another chamor. So again, the result of the bringing of proofs here is the opposite. By the case of marriage, it is to ruin her chazaka, and over here it is to keep his chazaka. So Amar Rav Nachman, we need a better answer. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Kala B'Vei Savia Ula Kiddushin. The Gemara pivots. We thought the whole time that we were talking about the money for the ksuba. The Gemara says that's not what we're talking about. We're comparing the case of para and the case of chamor to our case of the kala b'vei savia, but we're not talking about the money of the ksuba. We're talking about the money of the kiddushin. And if in fact there is a divorce, the father gets the money back. And the Gemara says, the lo tema, don't say that this is only true, that the father would get back the money for the kiddushin. The lo tema alibu demanda amar kiddushin lav lativuin nidnu, that kiddushin was not a permanent thing and it would always be returned. That's not the case, because it applies even according to the other shita. Alafidu demanda amar kiddushin lativuin nidnu. Even according to those who say that the money for kiddushin is a permanent gift, but there are still rules as to when it's a permanent gift. Hani mili kiddushay vadai. That's only true when the kiddushin was a valid kiddushin. Aval kiddushay tos, over here, since there's a mum, imaisi raya in ilolo. It depends. When will the money be permanent? Okay, so if they bring a raya that the kiddushin is valid, then the money is permanent, and we got it. But in this case, where it's kiddushay tos, so then the money gets returned in the kiddushin, and therefore we have a good comparison between the case of par and chamor on the one side, and our Mishnah on ayin hey amud aleph at the bottom with the kala beves aviha, and the money that we're discussing is a case of kiddushin, and the two cases line up nicely. The Gemara asks a question from a case of trephos. This particular sugya, or sugyas like this, raised a huge shaila about milking cows, because what they used to do is take a big fat needle and inject it through the belly, and they would give hormones to the animals through this injection, or antibiotics, whatever they were giving. So Rav Shechter from YU, Rav Phil Shechter, was very concerned that all of the milk animals who get these hormones were treif, and he doesn't drink milk. because of that. He's actually very concerned. And he brought this shiloh to Rabbi Yashiv Zatzal, and Rabbi Yashiv like waved him off. He said like, no, it's fine. But Rabbi Shechter doesn't drink milk from cows that are treated with these injections because there's a needle that goes into their stomach. What's the problem with that? Take a look at our Gemara. Meisvei, we have a question. Machat, if there's a needle, shenimtzeis be'ove beis hakosos, that's found in one of the 4 compartments of the stomach of a cow, mitzad echad kshera, if it only pierces one side of this beis hakosos, of this part of the stomach, then the animal is still a kshera. But mishnei tzadin, if the needle pierces 2 parts of the beis hakosos, 2 parts of the stomach, then treifa. Nimtza aleha korat dam. If we find that there's a little bit of blood, biadua shehi lifnei shchita. If we find on the needle that's piercing the stomach, if we find blood on it, we know that it was there from before the shchita because the blood was still flowing. Lo nimtza aleha korat dam. But if we don't find blood on the needle, biadua shula achar shchita. And then the Gemara says huglad piyamaka. If we see that there's scabbing, so then biadua sheshlosha yamim kodem shchita, that it was at least 3 days. That's how long it takes to scab. But if the entrance of the needle, that place does not have a scab on it, and then we know hamotzi mechavero olav haraya. Then under those circumstances, then we would apply the principle of hamotzi mechavero olav haraya in regards to someone who might want to collect from this animal. So it says the Gemara, what's going on here? We have a tavach, we have a butcher, and the butcher bought this cow. And when he looked inside the cow, he saw there was a needle through the beis hakosos. So says the Gemara, a little bit more than halfway down on Ayin Vav Amud Beis, v'yahiv tabach demei. If the butcher had already paid the seller of the cow for, let's say he gave him $1,000 for the cow. So says the Gemara, boy liisuye raya umapik. Then he, the tavach, has to bring a raya. He has to bring a proof that this was actually here, meaning he has to show that there's scabbing, which would be a raya, as we said, right, that there's blood on the needle. Whatever the case may be, he has to show that this needle was there from before, in which case it's a mekachtos and he gets his money back because remember the principle, hamotzi mechavero olav haraya. So right now, I as the tabach, I own the butcher house and I bought a cow from you. I open up the cow and I see there's a needle inside and I know that it's from before, hamotzi mechavero olav haraya, you have to give me my money back. But says the Gemara, ve'amai, why would you say in this case that it's hamotzi mechavero olav haraya? Bala behema leisi raya v'nekum. Why don't we say like we did earlier in the case of the bala chamor? Why don't we say that the seller has to bring a raya that the animal was perfectly healthy, and then he doesn't have to return the money? Meaning we have a machlokes in 2 sugyas. Do we always say hamotzi mechavero olav haraya, which would have been our assumption before today? Or are there times when we say that we don't need hamotzi mechavero olav haraya, that another person is able to simply support their own claim, even though they already have the money in hand? Says the Gemara, really the case that we're dealing with is not where the tavach had already paid for it. We're dealing with a case where b'delo yahiv tav chadmei, the butcher had not yet paid for the cow. So here's what happened. You are the seller of a cow. You own a cow farm. You give me Betsy the cow, and I say, I'm going to pay you next week. And then I get the cow, and it's already shechted, and I'm taking care of it. I'm dissecting it and taking the pieces I want, tossing the pieces I don't. And I find a big fat needle through the base, through the beis hakosos, through this part of the stomach, and that looks like a treifa. So it says the Gemara that the tavach has to bring a raya. And in this case, it's exactly like the balach hamor because he hasn't paid yet, and it's a case of here in this case where he owes money, but he doesn't have to pay yet because we have to determine as to whether or not this is actually a treifa. Says the Gemara, Mai, does that seem clear to you? Psaka, Rashi says over here, bitmia. This is a question. What, you think you have everything so clear? My psaka, is this really such a clear halacha? Ella, says the Gemara, Ki asa Rami bar Yecheskel. He said, Omar, lo titzaisinhu lahani klale dekal Yehuda achi mishmei deshmu. We've seen this now, I think, 3 times in Shas, mostly recently, where the Gemara says that don't listen to my brother Yehuda who sat in front of Shmuel. We know famously Yehuda the Amora sat in front of both Rav and Shmuel. Rav first and then Shmuel. Rav was a little older. And the Gemara says, don't listen to him, because really, Hachi Amar Shmuel, here is what Shmuel said. Kol shenolad safek birushuso. Wherever the safek was born, wherever the safek was realized, olav haraya. That's a very divergent opinion from hamotzi mechavero olav haraya. Because hamotzi mechavero olav haraya says, where's the money? And whoever has the money, if you want to extract from that person, hamotzi mechavero olav haraya. But here, Shmuel is of the opinion that wherever the safek is born, wherever the suffix is noticed, that is where the person would then have to bring a raya, v'tana tuna kala, and he says that's really where we have a comparison to our Mishnah. But says the Gemara, hold on one second, how can you say that we use the principle of nolad suffix birshus olav haraya, that wherever the suffix is found, that's the person who has to bring the raya? After all, meisve, we have the case of machat shenimtzeis be'ove beis hakosos. We had our case where we said that the tabach has to do that. If you wanted to say, like your previous answer, that he hadn't paid yet, bal behema boili suye raya umapik, it should have been the case that the bal behema should have been the one to bring the proof, and he would have then had to extract the money if it was in fact hamotzi michabrel varaya. But ve'amai, why would you say that that's true? That brisa should be an error. It should be sveika b'rshus tabach yitzalid. If Shmuel's right, and we only pursue a raya from the person for whom he found the problem, which in this case is the tavach, so then we break the principle anyways of hamotzi mechaveru olav haraya, and therefore it should be that the person who has to bring a raya is the tavach. Says the Gemara, the yoiv tavach me. Really, we're reversing this case yet again. We're really the tabach already paid for it. Umay asks the Gemara, Pascha, is this really clear to you that he already paid? Says the Gemara, it is really clear that he paid. Stama demilsa, this is normally how transactions take place. When you buy a cow, you pay on the spot. Kama de lo yohiv inish zuze, lo yohiv inish chiyusa. For as much as a person doesn't pay the money, he doesn't get the life. He doesn't get the product that he paid for. And therefore, we can fairly assume that he did in fact pay. And therefore, we can follow Shmuel's principle that because he paid, and now the money is in his possession, and he is also, this is the place where we found the suffix, so everything works out in this new comparison of Shmuel to compare the case of our Mishnah to the case of nolad b'safik b'rshuso olav haraya, that wherever the nolad is born, wherever the suffix, is born, that is the person who does the actual bringing of the proof. The Chachamim Omer, bottom couple of lines on Ayin Vav Amud Beis, and we'll be stopping at not the first Mishnah, but the second Mishnah down, just starting to prep to push a little bit. Tomorrow's a bigger blot. We spoke about the fact that there are some different types of mumin, and there are some that are hidden and some that are not. And in our Mishnah, we discussed that if in fact they had a bathhouse in that community, we had said that in that bathhouse, that because the husband can send his sister, send another woman into the bathhouse to make sure she has no other mumin on her body, we had said that there's really nothing that's really beseser anymore. Amar of Nachman, that's not true. B'nichpa, if a person has epilepsy, so then kimumin shebeseser dami. Somebody today told me that they wanted to open a school for a person who has invisible problems. Not noticeable special needs problems, but not even noticeable ADD problems, but just purely invisible issues, kids who don't learn exactly the same. Fascinating. Okay. That is treated, and I presume other types of similar disorders are treated as beseser. However, it's only true when this person gets their epileptic moments, their epileptic seizures at the same exact time, every day at 10 o'clock in the morning. Then they know to go in their room, have their seizure, and come back out and join everybody else. But if in fact their epilepsy shows its face at random times during the day, that's kimumin shebegalui. You can't control it. It's not. Rashi defines actually in the top line, nichpa choli. It's an illness shemimenu nofel la'aretz, that when it afflicts you, you actually fall to the ground. New Mishnah. What about mumin and men? We've been discussing primarily mumin and women. Ha'ish shenoldu bo mumin ein kofen osolahotzi. If a man ends up with a new mum, we don't force them to get divorced. Amar Rashbag b'medvar mamun b'mumin ketanim. This is only true b'mumin haktanim. This is only true with small mumin. However, aval b'mumin hagadolim kofen osolahotzi, with larger mumin, we do consider that a reason to divorce. Rabbi Yehuda Tani noldu. Rabbi Yehuda has in our Mishnah the language of noldu, that they just happened. These things just occurred, this new mum. And Chia Barav Tani hayu, not ha'ish shenoldu bo, but ha'ish shehayu bo, that he was born with it. Man da amar noldu kol shekain hayu. Of course, if he's going to say that it's a mum for having a new episode of it, and once he's married, then all the more so if he was born with it, because after all, maybe she will have accepted it. Manda amar hayu aval noldulo. But according to the shita that says that our Mishnah's language is hayu, that he always had it, but maybe not noldu. Tanan, we have a Mishnah. Amar Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, B'med Dvar Mamur. We learned in our Mishnah, B'mumin Ketanim, Ava B'mumin Agdolim Kofano Solahotzi. We saw in our Mishnah a distinction that with Mumin Ketanim, we don't force a divorce, but with Mumin Gedolim, we do. Bishlam Alamanta Amar Noldu. I could understand that this is a new issue, that if our Mishnah writes Noldu, that this is a new issue, Ha'ish Shenoldu, Hainu Deshayni Ben Gedolim Lektanim. Then, a woman wakes up one day and her husband has a big splotch on his face, a big new mole, wasn't there yesterday. If it's cut, then she'll stay married. If it's large, she'll divorce him. I understand that. But if he had this on his face the whole time, Malik Dolim Malik Tanim. She knew about it before they got married. She saw it on the first date. It's all over his face. Hasabra v'kibla. So says the Gemara, that's not necessarily true, because it could be that our Mishnah is not a raya that we have noldu versus hayu, because Kesura, maybe had it been that she was born, that her husband was born with this defect, maybe Kesura hishiacholo lekabel. She thought, my love for him is so great, I can handle the fact that he has a massive growth on his face. I can handle that. But now she can't handle it anymore.
Why should we force him to have to give her Kesubos? She's the one who changed her mind. At the time they got married, she thought she could handle it.
Yeah.
Okay. You changed your mind.
The Gemara is just saying over here that, because we tried to bring a raya from our Mishnah, from the question of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, we're just trying to bring a raya that we had asked, right? We had said maybe our Mishnah is a raya that it must be noldu. The language of our Mishnah is noldu, that he had a new issue, because had it been hayu, she knew about it the whole time. The Gemara says that's not a good logic, because if she knew about it the whole time, yes, maybe it was even a katan, maybe it was, but kasur hi sheichol lekabel va'achshav ein yichol lekabel. So you're saying that maybe she has to rough it now, because she decided.
I mean, if she can convince him to divorce her, great. But we're talking about a Mishnah where he's forced to add to her Kesubos.
So the language of the Mishnah is very interesting. Kofin oso lahotzi. He has to divorce her.
Right. And give her Kesubos.
Correct.
She's entitled to get away with her, take her Kesubos.
That's correct.
Why should he have to suffer, so to speak? She's the one who changed her mind.
Oh, that's a good question.
That's what I'm saying. Kofin lahotzi means she's entitled to get out and to be made whole, because
Tosfos asked your question. Second, the third Tosfos down. Svura hayisi shani yechol lekabel k'tas tema dim kain kolisha tari mitisa enuk deshi yitin laksuba shetomer eni yechol lekabel vigarshena shema b'makom sheyesh chasharama en laksuba. Could be Tosfos says like you. Beautiful. Tosfos says that maybe if there's this ploy, then she won't get her ksuba. Very good, David. Beautiful. I didn't even think about that. That's great. And I also didn't see Tosfos till 4 seconds ago. So thank you for that. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, because there's a harama that could easily take place. I don't like the mole on your face, and give me a divorce. Okay, but even Tosfos wasn't sure. Just the last many words of Tosfos, V'shema.
Usually the answer to that is it's been here all along. You went on a date, you saw it.
We would have assumed.
Right.
We would have assumed. V'shema b'makom sheyesh chashash harama ein laksuba. Wow, I'm sure other Rishonim of the Balei Tosfos ilk, like the Tosfos Harash and others, I'm sure they all speak of it. The Rush probably. Okay. The Rush was the last of the Balei Tosfos. I'm curious what he says about it. We can look it up afterwards. All right, let's finish up this sugya. Eluhain mumin gedolim. What are considered to be significant mumin? Piresh Rashba kigo nismis eno, if he has one blind eye. Nikta ayado, if he has a severed hand. V'nishbera raglo, if he has a broken leg. So some of the Meforshim here explained in regards to the broken leg that this doesn't just mean a broken leg temporarily. It means something permanent, like a paralyzed leg or something significant that they can't even move. It's Mardi Amoraim say, what's the halacha? Rabbi Abba Bar Yaakov Amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha kirashbag, that we hold like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. That Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in our Mishnah makes a distinction between the mumin. If it's a mum katan, they don't have to get divorced, but if it's a mum gadol, they do have to get divorced. Rav Amar, in the name of Rav Nachman, no, halacha kechachamim, halacha kedivrei chachamim. So asks the Gemara, I don't understand. Why would Rav Yochanan say that the halacha is like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel? Umi Amar Rav Yochanan hachi, would he actually pipe up and ever say that the halacha is like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel? After all, Rav Yochanan himself was the one who said the shita that we always hold like Rashbag. V'ha'amar Rabba bar Bar Chana amar Rav Yochanan b'chol makom sheshana Rabban Gamliel b'mishnaseinu halacha kamoso chutz me'ar v'tzidan v'rayach rona. We're not going to go into what those cases are, but we hold like Rashbag in basically every case in Shas. So why would Rav Yochanan have ever said that? So says the Gemara, Amorainin hu v'ali b'di Rav Yochanan. You're right. He probably didn't need to say it, but some of the Amoraim did say it in his name. We're going to stop right here at this Mishnah. Tomorrow night we're going to learn Daf Ayin Zayin, a little bit of a bigger blot, and Yirtzeh Hashem will finish the parak. On Thursday night we're going to be pushing a little bit extra, close to 2 blot, certainly a blot and a half. Friday we're going to learn a blot as well, Yirtzeh Hashem Daf Pei, and then Shabbos we're going to learn Sunday's blot. And that way we won't have to learn Sunday, which is Erev Rosh Hashanah. I can't learn in the morning anyways. There's a bris right after one of the minyanim. And Sunday we won't learn. Rosh Hashanah day 1 we'll learn Daf Pei Beis, which is the right plot. And Rosh Hashanah day 2 is Daf Pei Gimel. And that's what we'll do. Wishing you all a beautiful night.